Wormhole Manifest, episode 004, stardate 10010001100, part 2. Captain Wormhole's Log Supplemental. Last week we tried to record an episode with tonight's special guest, and at about 34.6 minutes into it, I realized that it wasn't even recording. I've sent myself to the brig for misconduct and whipped myself with a Ferengi laser lasso. But tonight we're going to try again and hope for the best. Our guest tonight is none other than Mora the Artisan Rogue. He's an excellent graphic artist, retro toy collector, and all-around amazing individual. He's even published his own comic books. Mario, your name has been added to the manifest. For real this time. Are you
That's
ready?
awesome.
Are you ready to venture deep into the cosmos of radical discussion via the wormhole of mystical redundancy?
Absolutely. Yes. Make it so.
Make it so. All right. So we recorded, or we started. We thought we were recording last time on Thursday, a couple nights ago, and we got like it was an awesome discussion. First, I mean, that was just like it was great, and then, like when I found out it wasn't recording, I was like so bummed for like 2 days. I'm like, man, that was like really going to be in like an epic episode, you know, because we talked about everything. We were like talking about like Ghostbusters and like how I got my name Wormhole and stuff. I know. Like, you know, and like it just was, it was really great. Like you had some great feedback, and I guess we're going to like journey on from there. You know, we don't look back, you know, we look back and appreciate the past for what it was, but we move on, you know, like
absolutely.
We can't stay there and focus on it and just wallow in the the lost recordings.
I think everybody that creates any kind of media today has gone through that.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing you can do about it. I have a buddy that he runs around also at shows and stuff, and he'll do quick little interviews. And this has been a few years when those little personal recorders were first out, and they had gone completely digital. He had no cassette, right? Because he had an older cassette one, so he'd see the tape, right? Yeah. He was so nervous. He had met like a couple voice actors and some people, and the entire time he kept pushing the red button, you know, expecting it to be recording. And it wasn't until the second day that he realized he'd never loaded the batteries.
Oh.
And he never bothered to look. He was just in a hurry trying to get to everyone, trying to get to the panels, trying to get snippets. And he's like, it was literally the most insane thing I've ever done. I never bothered to look to see that any light came on, that anything was working.
Oh, man.
And I could only commiserate that level of anxiety. I've known that.
Yeah.
That gut crushing moment when you're like, damn it.
The sky is falling, you know? You're like, why?
I know. Yeah, you just want to scream to the heavens at that point. Yeah, I mean, we've all been there. So it's not a big deal. You're
like Charlton Heston at the end of Planet of the Apes, and you're out on the beach. You blew it up.
It's true. It's absolutely true. I know, like, I've even heard people too. Like, I've said this often. Like, there'll be times I don't know if you've ever gone through this before or not, where maybe you've had a discussion with somebody in your life, and you just so much wish that there had been something recording that moment.
Oh, yeah.
Because a conversation is maybe 15 to 30 minutes or however long it is of just wonderful joy, spontaneity.
Yeah.
And you go, God, but it's, to your point, the beauty of the fleeting moment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You have the memory of it. And that's like, you know, I don't know. And not just the memory of the words said, but the memory of the emotions, the things that you were feeling while it was happening. Yeah. And you're like, you wish there was some way that you could have like savored that or recorded it to, but even if you did, even if you were able to record that, you would only hear back the words, you know, and it'd be hard to replicate the true, you know, the feeling of that moment, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
And, like we have like movies and stuff we watch, and like we loved them the first time we watched them, and it brought this feeling and emotion, and it may spark some of that when we rewatch it like 5 years later, but it's never the same as that original moment, and I guess it's kind of like those people that you hear the stories of chasing the dragon, like people that do heroin, and it's such a great feeling or whatever. And so they try to, and that's what gets them hooked, because they want to experience that again, but you can't because of the way the body chemistry is made up and the way that it affects like your brains, the brain chemistry and everything. It's like, you can't replicate that initial feeling, so they're stuck just trying to loop back in and re-experience, I guess, and
yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's weird. I didn't even make the connection in my head till right now. I mean, although it's fairly obvious, you always hear the old saying of, first impressions are everything.
Yeah.
And there is a certain addictive quality. There's something connotative about that where you have, the first time you encounter somebody or you have a moment with somebody, that first impression, that first blushing moment is so precious because I think that's something that I struggled with even the limited time that I did acting and things like that, because to get that same emotive concept back out there, to bring that same element of spontaneity and trying to reinvent it is hard.
Yeah.
That's why I have mad respect for the big pro guys that do voice acting, because, they give you a little slip of paper. You're in the booth.
Yeah.
And you got to go 0 to 60 and make somebody believe it,
That's true. I hadn't really thought about that. Like I've watched like the behind the scene videos like of voice actors doing the things in the studio, and it's like, they're, like you said, they're reading off a piece of paper and like they're projecting what the words say, but they're putting emotion and stuff behind it, and it's like, how do you do that? Like, how do you just create this character that you're seeing on the screen, you're visually seeing it, but the voice is giving it life, like, and the animators give it life by the motion, but like the voice is really like, that draws you into the character itself. You're like, it makes it believable,
It does. That was, I've had conversations with a few voice actors. When I was at Hallmark, I did voice acting for about 2 years for them. And there was a similar thing. You go into this small, sweaty little booth. And that the very first time I ever went into one, it was this deadening quality because you can't take jangly nothing,
Oh yeah.
Because I was recording on a microphone that I was told was a $30,000 microphone. Wow. A shotgun mic that picked up. If my mustache rustled, it picked that. It was so. I was like, good God. And there was one point they actually, the sound engineer was like, can you stop rubbing your eye? Because we're picking that up.
Oh man.
And it really was. I would do this and you could hear when I bent in, you could hear the viscosity on my eyelid. I was like, no, they played it back. I'd never heard my eye in stereo before.
Oh, wow.
It was horrifying.
Squish.
It was. It was
You're like
yeah,
the
it was
human experience. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, that's what I sound like? Oh God, I'm squishy.
We all are.
Yeah, all right.
If you could like record everything in life, from like just with one of those microphones and just hear the things, like, somebody walking across like, down a hallway with like corduroy pants, it's just like, what the hell is that noise?
I remember, what, I met a Foley guy that did sound recording one time years and years ago. And he said the most fun he ever had was recording somebody in Jinkos. Remember those pants?
Yeah. The like JNCOs or like
and because when they'd walk, it was literally that like corduroy pant, like, thing. The pant legs are massive. Like homeless people could live underneath them. And they're just like going together. And he said it was interesting because that was the sound of folded clothing when because he needed a sound for a little radio program they were doing. And they were like, well, what does folding clothing sound like? And he's like, he tried everything, like folding towels, but it's just soft.
Yeah.
And there was something about the fabric and pant legs and a person walking in it. So he clipped a microphone to them, but you had to be careful because if it hit the microphone, you're just getting that bass hit.
Yeah.
But I found that stuff fascinating. I really fell in love with Foley recording for a while because, like, I don't think we ever take, as humans, we take so much for granted that we hear. And I think I think I remember reading somewhere that our mind does allocate a certain amount, like I can hear you, you can hear me, but I'm tuning out the little cat water fountain in the background, things like that.
It's kind of like that, like white noise thing, where, and there's like binaural beats and those kinds of things that can, if you listen with headphones, they can like stimulate like parts of the brain almost into like a psychedelic experience, because it's the way it's, so it's weird. Like, if you just go outside and sit and it's like silent out and just listen to nature, and like try to keep yourself quiet and like just breathe normally and just listen. Like it's crazy. There's like a million different sounds out there that you just, and I did that like a couple weeks ago. I was like sitting out there and I was like just listening and I'm like, this is, like if that's all you heard and if it was amplified, like turned up to 11, like you would go crazy because it's just so much to take in, like, man, it's just, and these senses that we have and the way that our brain processes all these things and like the stimuli and all that, it's crazy how like our subconscious kind of like says, no, you're going to focus on this now.
Absolutely.
This is what you're focused on and don't pay attention to the rest, like, it's crazy. Like
I've always like, that, and I love that you brought up the binaural beats and that sort of thing. My therapist was telling me because I had a lot of times where I was struggling with, with density layers of anxiety. And so I was like, I can't, like, I have a real hard time. I am completely incapable of multitasking. That word is nothing I can define for myself. And, for some of the time that I had been going through therapy, the therapist I had was thankfully a very good one. Because a good therapist is hard to find. Yeah. And he really worked with me on a lot of this. Right? Okay. So, and
it's good you're talking about this because like one of the, I mentioned before, like one of my goals with this show is mental health and like, and I'm glad you brought this up because like, you're an artist and you do all these things. And like one of the things that I did when I was younger and before I even realized that I had a lot of like mental illness or like any kind of issues, like I did all these different things to like escape the reality of my situations I was in or the depression I was feeling or the emotions that were going on or the anxiety I was feeling, like, and I did all these things. But like, you're right, like a therapist, like I'm fully adamant on people doing therapy if they need it, like it's definitely a good thing, but you do have to find the right one for you.
Yes, absolutely.
And so like, is your, your experience, go on with what you were saying about finding the therapist, but like as an artist, like I wanted to kind of get into that a little bit about that escape kind of thing. Maybe it's not an escape, but it's like a redirection. Like I know with me and what you said about multitasking, like I'm like ADHD. So like I get hyper focused on one thing. Like when I'm doing that one thing, I'm hyper focused and everything else is like, I can't be watching TV, watching a show that I'm into and like even look at my phone for a second because the phone will take my attention away and I feel bad because I missed what was going on the TV. Yeah. Like even if I missed like 2 or 3 sentences of what the character said, I'm like, what do I, like I got to go back, like what did they say? What's going on? I'm missing these key elements of what was going on. So I have to hyper focus on like one thing or another, or take a break from one thing. But like if I'm sitting on the couch looking at my phone, I don't like just, I can sit in silence, but I like to have something else going on at the same time, like in the background, for that sound to kind of drowned out. But like for you, like about the therapist and stuff and like all that, go on with that.
Sure. Like, well, so he was the first one to tell me about binaural beats and things because I was having problems focusing on things. And I still am. I mean, one of the things I had a misdirection in my mind that once you get into therapy, like you go maybe 6 weeks, couple months, and you're done. It's not the case. And it became even more quizzical for me because, you know, I had struggled and I didn't even realize this. Like I've had a multitude of things that I've had to overcome. Depression was the first actual mainstay. It was the first real challenge to overcome. And I'm still working toward it, but I know I've made a lot of movement forward in good ways because, in being creative, like I at least have the outlet, whether it's poetry, whether it's, visual, whether it's even making videos or whatever it is I'm doing. There's an outlier for me to be able to persevere and put things into. Now, that can also be kind of a weird thing because like currently the fantasy world I'm working on right now is called the World of Ardor, and it focuses on a young lady who's an artist and kind of this fantastic adventure she goes on. But all of the creatures that are in there, there's two main types. There's the Bakur and then the Salambish. The Salambish are the shadowy creatures that look a little more horrific, a little bit more fear of the dark kind of an aspect. The Bakur are sort of a takeoff on it. They're the antithesis of what Christian angels are supposed to be. So they're beatific in their look, but they are cold and calculating and at their root very evil. But it was a concept of, you know, the worst mask that anyone can wear is virtue. And because they have this porcelain-like look, people would normally, historically, they had interacted with humans of the past. And so that was my theory on how Christendom was born. We took it the wrong way. We looked at these things and we were like, oh my God, it's gorgeous. Must be good. The shadowy creatures are actually the good ones. But both of those two archetypes that I had created were elements of my depression. It was a way for me to deal with things because, growing up, this is one of the weird things. You probably can relate to this. When you're going through therapy, there's a lot of surface tension that you deal with, that affects your everyday life.
Yeah.
And those are the first things you like run right at them. It's like being in football camp, which I don't know what that's like, but it's like, I'm surmising. I'm going to use a lot of sports talk, having never played sports. And, so you run at it and you try and tackle it or whatever you do. And when you do that, you start to peel back things and you go, oh, look at what's underneath this.
Yeah.
And you start finding other things underneath there. And that was the same sort of thing because I was able to figure out that even though I was creative all my life, in high school was where I really started taking it seriously. Like, okay, maybe I want to do something with this. But I also struggled because this was a really weird time. We're talking 90s, early 90s for me. And I remember that I would struggle a lot socially. I didn't have a real good way of interacting with people. And even the few friends I had were very accepting, but I had a hell of a time making eye contact with people. I had no real social skills. And I struggled with a lot of that. Well, I have my theater teacher, Mrs. Mazza, to thank for this. She pulled me aside one day after class and she's like, I think you're on the spectrum. And that was the very first time I'd ever heard that. And I was like, I don't understand what you mean. She said, well, you don't, she was like, and she explained patiently, you don't look at people. There's certain things. And she was like, I think you have some discomfort in this, and this could lead to some problems down the line. She's like, I'm not a therapist. I don't know much about this, but you might be able to figure something else out by doing some stuff. So by doing stuff like improv and theater, she helped me kind of devote a portion of my exterior thinking into a much more extroverted manifest. And it allowed me to be able to talk to people and even do stuff like this.
Yeah.
Because, and it's weird, I've learned how to do this stuff, but I am painfully introverted.
Yeah.
And when people meet me at shows or something like that, they're like, oh, you're just out and loud and proud. And I'm like, no, not, no, no. For every day of this, it takes a week to recover.
Yeah.
No,
I definitely can relate to that. Like that whole story, like that reminds me of like, some of the things that I kind of tackled early on. I was I guess I was like kind of experiencing similar things, like um, as far as like the eye contact and like these different social mannerisms that people
mm-hmm.
call typical or normal. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was not that. Like I would talk to someone, and while I was talking to them, I wouldn't look at them. Like I would kind of look at them while I'm talking to them to see what their reaction is. But
Yeah.
like when they talk to me, like I would kind of look away, because I would like focus on just something wherever, so that I could
Mm-hmm.
listen better.
Yep.
It's kind of like that thing where you're like, you're pulling up to a stop sign and there's multiple cars, but you got to turn the radio down so you can figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
There's just those little instances where you're like, I can't do one thing and do all this other stuff at the same time. Like I got to take it all in incrementally, like these, one step at a time. And any other little weird thing might like feel like it's intruding on your thoughts. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, I got to like cancel this out so I can focus on this, and,
Absolutely.
but like, that's interesting that you said like, that she mentioned about being on the spectrum, because I didn't hear about any of that kind of stuff like growing up, or even like I did a bunch of crazy stuff, like join the military, like you said. I didn't I myself had no interest in sports, or
Mm-hmm.
any of that stuff. Like I did a lot of like introverted stuff. Like I played video games, all day,
Mm-hmm.
and like I read books and I read comics, and my socializing was when I started skateboarding, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like meeting up with friends to skateboard, but then I would like, we're just doing stuff together, like outside. And then I would go home and like retreat into my little cave of a
Yeah.
room, and be creative in that way to kind of outlet some of the anxiety that I felt that day by being out in public, like, and just,
Yeah.
like kind of decompress and all that. But like as a parent of a child that's on the spectrum, I've been looking into over the past 15 years, looking into a lot of different things, and I'm like, that it makes a lot of sense that I may have also been on the spectrum, like,
Mm-hmm.
and when I first started having a lot of mental health problems after my father died, um, I started going into therapy. And when I was talking to the psychiatrist, he was like kind of giving me these like, not really like tests, but like asking me different questions like that were on like a sheet, to kind of get like an idea of like what he could diagnose, and everything that he asked me, and then apparently the answers I gave him the, he just knew somehow. Like he was like, from his whatever, however many years of expertise in this, in treating people, like he was like, okay, I believe you're ADHD and you're OCD, and you may be bipolar, like just
Wow.
all this different stuff. And I'm like, wow. And that was kind of like jarring in a way, because I'm like, but he's like, but the more he talked to me, the more it kind of made sense, because as I became an adult, like from like age 17 or so, I started drinking a lot.
Oh, wow.
So, and that helped me get it made me more social. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't, I didn't have to, be the same person I was before that couldn't handle social situations. Like
Oh, yeah.
I became like way more open, and I was like, a fun guy partying, like with friends and stuff, and like, I just, it made me feel good, even though a lot of times I felt bad the next day or whatever, I was like,
Yeah.
it's a small price to pay, but if I would have been treated back then, they would have discovered all these different issues. But it wasn't until I quit drinking about 5 years ago. I drink a little bit now, but nowhere near the amount I used to. Once I stopped drinking, because I was like, I got put on a bunch of medications, and they say you can't drink with this stuff because it will mess you up. So I was like, okay, you know, I'll just stop drinking, you know? And so it took me a while to kind of just totally quit. But once I stopped, it seemed to like uncover a lot more, like past trauma and things like that. Like, because I was starting to think how I did a long time ago as a young, you know, like a middle schooler and stuff like, and I was like, you know, I don't like this, you know, like, because with the drinking, I could put a mask on everything, put a Band-Aid on it, or, you know, use it as a crutch to not think about the stuff that was actually bothering me. Yeah. And so I did that for so long that it just kind of compounded all the things that happened since I started drinking up to the point where I stopped. So I was like, you know, even in the military, you know, like the stuff that happened that I, you know, went through and witnessed there, I just was able to, you know, like, cause every night when I got done working a shift while I was in the military, I went back to my room or apartment and I just got wasted, you know, and that's how I dealt with things. I was like, man, that fucker that gives me a bunch of shit at work, you know, like that sergeant, you know, like he's such a piece of shit and I hate him, you know, like I would just like, instead of going off on somebody at work and getting in trouble, I would mask it by going home and just drinking all night and then get up and do the same thing the next day. But when I got to work the next day, I may have felt like crap, but I was able to handle the day, like, and not get in trouble. Like, I just stayed silent and just did my work. And, you know, I don't even know how I functioned, honestly. Yeah. Like, I just did somehow, you know, and I guess that's the thing about being an alcoholic is you just deal with things like you're able to function, you know, you can function highly and almost better than if you were like on medications or something. Like you're covering everything up. So you don't have to deal with things, you know, and that's not a long-term solution, you know?
No.
So,
well, and even to that point, like I did, you know, private sector security for bars for years. So, you know, you end up seeing all kinds of stuff play out like that.
Yeah.
And there's one anecdote I can share with you. There was a guy, I remember one night, this was here in Kansas City at Power and Light. I was doing the front door and, you know, you always get all kinds that'll come out to bars. And Shark Bar was always considered kind of a fun bar to work at for people, unless you were security or staff. But but this group of guys came out, and I'm talking like the Bromaster Bros that are like, you know, like big dudes. Yeah. And they got like the Affliction shirts on that are schmedium sized, but they're like really supposed to be in a fucking 3XL. And this guy, like there was 4 of them that I saw, and then a head behind them. And why I say that is because the alpha male, or what I assumed was the alpha male, was in the back. And so the others come in the front. And it was funny because it was almost like a stair step effect of these guys. The first one was one of those little bigs, you know, like 5'2", but like no neck. Like the trap starts at the bottom of the ears and melds down into the shoulders, and, you know, just walks like this, you know. And I was like, chill, you're gonna have a heart attack, you know. But the other 2 dudes were normal, and then this other guy came by, and I don't know why, but when there are and this isn't for all of them. I know plenty of guys that are professional weightlifters and fitness guys that are really cool people.
Yeah.
But the majority of them are these in my experience, hyper insecure, very odd people. And they come by, but they almost always want to make good with the security guys, right? I don't know why. It's like, you know, whatever, right? So they're just like, yeah, dude, oh, you're so awesome doing security. They go inside, about maybe an hour or so goes by, and the biggest of them, we're just going to call him Alpha Male, he comes back up to the front. He's a little bit inebriated at this point, and he's like, just wanting to stand next to me. He just has his arms folded. He was like, and I was like, have you ever done security? He goes, no, I kind of want to just stand here with you for a while. I was like, okay. So we chat for a while and just about the weather and women walking by, that sort of thing. But otherwise, he's harmless. goes back in. The night goes on. And as the night goes on, people get more and more drunk.
Yeah.
He comes back out. He's a little more tipsy, a little more huggy. And I want to put it into context that I only come up to this man's nipple. Okay, he's a large man. Now I'm 5'10", and so you can imagine how much more man was above. And so he comes back out. He's super loud now. He's very huggy. He's like, all right, man, I'm gonna get you a drink. I'm like, I can't drink on the job. No, dude, it's on me, bro. It's on me, bro. I'm like, no, bro, I can't drink. And he's like, okay, cool. Well, it's cool. You know what? You're good, man. You're good, man, because you won't drink on the job. I'm like, yeah. So he goes in. Finally, and the last third and last time he comes out. This time he comes out, eyes are watery and super sweaty. Shirt's untucked. He's lost a shoe. And he comes out. He stands next to me, and I'm like, what's going on? And I notice his lip is quivering. I'm looking at him. I'm like, oh, this is going to be weird. And without warning, I thought he was like mad, but he grabs me and he gives me this hug. And my face careens up into his armpit. And it's like wet clay on the side of my face as I'm like, just it's like the slickest. It's the closest I would ever imagine wrestling a walrus would be like, as I just slid up into this pocket underneath his bicep. His arm was big enough, I will never forget this, that he had a tattoo of a skull on it. Only being this close, though, I realized this skull is about the same size as mine. He had a rather large bicep.
Wow.
But I'm like, but he was talking and he was like, I really envy you, man, because you're just doing you. You're just being you. And I'm like, do tell. And he's like, yeah. I mean, like, I want to show you something. And so he pulls up this other sleeve. And as he's pulling it up, it's like a sleeve full of beautiful, gorgeous tattoos, right? And he's like, do you know what this is? I was like, tattoos? He's like, peer pressure. And I'm like, what? And in my head, two different lines of thought are going. One, what do you mean peer pressure? Two, who peer pressured you?
Yeah.
But he went on to tell me that he didn't mind tattoos, but he only got the sleeve because the other three guys got sleeves.
Oh, man.
Dude, after that, it was 15 minutes. By the time it was done, he talked about how his father wouldn't speak to him anymore because he had tattoos. How, he wasn't totally sure, but he kind of found some guys hot. Thankfully, not me. And like, just, all this other stuff. Like, just, I'm like, where is this? Why are you talking to me?
Wow.
And it was so disruptive to me that I ended up bringing that up with my counselor later. And he said, there's a point where some people will just reach a breaking point where they just need an ear.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter. And at that point, he was like, when you're that drunk, all filters are off.
Yeah.
He won't remember it. But there's an emotional construct inside of him that just collapsed and needed that reprieve. And he was like, you just happened to be there. He said, thankfully, I didn't take it badly. I didn't, what was I going to do?
Right.
So,
oh, man. Yeah, like his like the pressure valve was released, like it was just everything's coming out, he's like deflating, metaphysically or like mentally, like he's just like venting all the stuff out that's been built up for so long. And man, that's wow, that's a cool story, man. That's like and it makes you think,
it does.
Like you're just like, wow.
I love conversations like I really do, but that one was like drinking from a fire hydrant.
Oh yeah,
there was no way to really encapsulate it, and I remember like it was just awkward because I'm still checking IDs. People are coming in, they're like, oh, clearly these guys are having a moment, it's just like I know, like, and it was just weird. But even when he left, he was like, bro, and I'm like, yep, bro, all right, cool, man.
All right.
And I get it, and I
therapy, please.
Right? Yeah. Here's a coupon, really. I just, and that's the thing. Like, and ever since then, that and some other moments I've dealt with, because a good buddy of mine, JP, he was stationed in Afghanistan, and he was another guy that also had a creative background, but because he'd been in the military after the stuff he'd gone through over there, when he came back, he didn't really have he used to ask me questions about that all the time. And I said, I just have to put what is some of the darker stuff that I have to deal with into my art, however it comes out. Some of my poetry I don't ever publish because it is really dark. You know, it's the angrier side of me. It's the frustrated side, whether we're talking about socio-political aspects or we're talking about frustration about my backyard not being mowed because of rain for 5 days. It doesn't matter. All of those little tidbits pile up. And this is something too that I've become much more aware. And maybe you've dealt with this. People will sometimes think that if you're going to therapy or you've had your outburst, like let's say, like, and this has happened, I can be dead honest about this. When I was working at Hallmark and I had that very corporate job, going in, sitting, you hear the same water cooler talk, you hear the same stories.
Yeah.
And one day you may just snap. You know, you're just angry. You're just pissed off. It doesn't matter. And you lose it. And everyone acts like, wow, where did that come from? Or, well, do you feel better? Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on. And it's the most debilitating and just deflating moment that I can recall in dealing with that, and I don't actually blame them for it. Nobody likes to see something like that happen.
Yeah.
But there's never a support system within things like that. You know, the best you can do is go talk to HR.
Yeah.
You know, I'd much rather wrestle a grizzly bear, you know, than, I'm going to go talk to a corporate head about, you know, something I'm dealing with.
I guess, I mean, I can relate to that in that I've had a lot of situations where I've like snapped, you know. I don't know if it was like in the corporate environment. The closest I can come to was that while working in a corporate environment, like I had found out that my ex-wife was pregnant, and like for some reason, like I was so caught off guard by this that people knew me for making like weird offhanded comments, like just random things like I picked out of space and had nothing to do with the conversation. It was kind of like goes along with the wormhole thing. Like, you know, Scotty beamed him the fuck up because I'd be in the middle of something and I would just stop talking and they would look at me like, what's next? You know, like, you know, he's not here anymore, people, you know, let's just leave him be and he'll come back to us eventually, you know, like, but like, you know, the same thing, like I would just be, you know, these guys, you know, like I was telling a story and I was saying this and that, and like, this is what happened. And like, you know, like whatever. And, you know, I'd just be gone, you know, but like, it was so random because these guys were like, they would ask me one thing about like something we were actually working on, like a project, like, you know, this part of the aircraft, we need you to look at it because the wiring schematics say that this part needs to go to this part and it can't touch anything that's metal around it through this junction. What do you see? Yeah. I bought a couple GameCubes on eBay the other day. You know, that's what they would get, you know? So like, they're like, okay, Wormhole, let's just move on. Like, so what do you think about the junction here? You know? And I'm like, oh man, it looks awesome to me, man. It's some great wiring jobs. You guys are such professionals, you know, like I enjoy working with you guys so much because you're so professional and you do this stuff and make it look like artwork. You know, it's like a masterpiece when you guys get done with it. And they're like, and then later on they'll be like, so you got a couple GameCubes? And I'm like, oh yeah, you want one? so it was funny, but like, you know, those offhanded comments, like about going back to like how I found out that my ex-wife was pregnant. This was our second child. And I just got the news out of the blue. It might've been like a text message or something. And I was just like, I went in and I didn't mean it in any kind of context or like seriousness, but like this one guy I worked with, he's like, hey man, what's wrong with you? Because I was very deep in concentration and I'm like, how am I going to afford to have another kid. Like
all
these things were going through my head. And I looked at him and I said, man, I think I'm going to kill myself. Wrong thing to say.
Yeah.
He reported me. I thought me and him were friends, and he knew that all this weird stuff I said was not to be taken seriously.
Right.
But don't ever say stuff like that, like in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
And later on that night, I had to talk to our foreman, and the foreman had me call this helpline, and I had to tell him, like, no, that's, like, yes, I have problems with depression sometimes, but like, it's nothing like that. I was talking to the guy and I was talking to my friend at work, and I was like, I said this comment, but it was very like out of context. Like it didn't have any substance behind it. I don't think about suicide or any of this stuff. Part of me, I think back, may have been lying, but like, I didn't want the corporate world to know that because of the stigma of mental health. Like,
you're right.
And like I said, I was already an alcoholic and had been for years. So like, I hid all that stuff and put the mask on when I went to work, and like, nobody knew, it's kind of like Robin Williams, like, is a comedian, is super funny, but nobody knew he had these issues behind that. I mean, as far as we knew, like, none of the general public knew. He may have been talking to people or his close friends or family, but like, nobody else knew. None of his fans knew. Like, and that's the thing about, I always wonder, I have some friends that are comedians, and, if they start talking about mental health, and I'm like, yes, talk about mental health. Let's break the stigma. Like, let's get this out there, that know that it's okay to not be okay, because like I said, when I was drinking all that, like, I was covering it up. And when I stopped drinking, all hell broke loose. Like, I had a psychotic break and all kinds of stuff. I spent time in the hospital, and they were trying to figure out what was going on. And I was like, I don't know. I just got to work on a lot of stuff. And so, okay. Like, we're going to take a break real quick.
Sure.
This is like it's gone a little past the mid section of the show. I'm trying not to keep the shows too long, but I like to put a break in the middle here, and
excellent.
We'll come back and we'll continue the discussion, and we'll do the, I want to kind of get into like some of the stuff that you do, some of your work. So everyone stay tuned. We will be right back. Hey, this is Matt from the Wormhole Manifest podcast. For those that do not know, my daytime job is running the small, veteran-owned computer repair business called B Squared Computer Repair LLC. Using my over 20-year experience, I'm able to diagnose and repair even the most stubborn issues. If you're having a Windows-based computer-related problem, feel free to reach out and let me help you with that. If you are local to us, feel free to give us a call and set up an appointment at 660-687-0100. If you're not local, check out our website, www.bsquaredcomps.com. That's BSQUAREDCOMPS. We also have a Facebook business page and are standing by Monday through Friday to help you get up and running again. Special note, we do not mess with Apple or Mac products. Hey everyone, we're back from our break. Me and Mario were actually just spent like an hour talking during the break and had a bunch of stories and stuff we were sharing with each other. And it was a great conversation. And we could have just kept recording. And I bet a lot of you would have got a kick out of some of the stuff we were talking about. It was pretty great. But continuing with the show, Mario, like there's, let's see, like I wanted to get it kind of into some of the stuff that you do, like, like some of your side projects, and like, I think your art's amazing, man. I still need to get a couple of your prints and stuff, because I want to get them and like hang them up and stuff. And,
I appreciate
because I like, man, some of the, like the robot stuff like that you do, like the big, like mecha kind of things that, like, I don't know. It just, that shit kicks ass. Like I look at it and I'm like, man, like, I just want to hang that up. Cause it just, it almost like, when I look at your art, like I don't have to know the story behind it, because my mind like generates like a whole universe of, behind it, like there's like all these comic books have like, there's like the Marvel comic universe and DC comics. Like you kind of know that there's a bunch of characters and or there's like hundreds of characters with all backstories and all this kind of stuff, but like I look at your stuff and I'm like, there is a whole new universe that like revolves around this character or these different characters, the scene of things that's going on, so like if you just want to talk about like some of your inspirations and things, like and tell people, I want to get this out there, like where they can get some of this stuff or see your work.
Sure. Well, we can. I'll go ahead and lead with that first. I have an Etsy store where a lot of my stuff is listed. You can find my handle, The Artisan Rogue. If you search that, that is what I use on everything from Twitter to TikTok to my Etsy store. My website is theartisanrogue.com, and that's got links to everything on there. The whole story behind a lot of this is I was inspired really big by shadow puppetry growing up. And because when my earliest memories that were really fundamental to my artwork are kind of twofold. When I was young, the very first time I ever touched a painting or did anything like that, my dad, being in the military, had gotten transferred to Italy, Aviano Air Base. So my first, second, and third year of elementary school was spent there. It was unique because first thing that happened was when we got there, I was exposed to anime. First time ever. Dubbed in Italian. And so Lupin the Third, Macross, Gundam, those were the first three things I remember seeing. I didn't know what I was watching, but I thought it was cool. So that kind of kickstarted because I was like, okay, whatever this is. So that it's kind of weird because those things were, Lupin the Third is very much bigger than life stories. It's action oriented. It's all these other things, but especially Gundam and Macross were these essentially soap operas with giant robots.
The space opera, like I remember when Carl Masek like learned about Macross, that's when he took the 3 different series and brought it to America and cut the hell out of it and spliced it and made his whole new series called Robotech, and re-released it. And the first, I think the first season, I have all the box sets, by the way, because Robotech was I grew up on that. That was my, and you're right. It was like a soap opera for nerds like us that were we wanted to know about characters and their backstories and their lives and their, everything about those characters. So I totally agree. That was some of my first introduction to anime too, and it wasn't, I didn't know that it was Japanese until my dad, who actually was in the Navy during the Korean War. And he was sailing on an aircraft carrier and got to stop in Japan a few times.
Oh yeah.
And so he knew some Japanese from being there. He told me a lot of stories, but I want to be a fly on the wall with him doing his explorations in mainland Japan and stuff, because he learned so much while he was there. And I'm knowing him, growing up, I can just imagine him as a young guy back in the 50s, going to another country. He must have been off the wall. He was probably doing all kinds of crazy stuff and drinking and partying with geishas and stuff, no wonder he learned Japanese, because he was partying with them and stuff,
oh, totally.
But he came up to me one time when I was sitting there watching, I think I was watching Voltron, and he looked at the credits as they were rolling by at the end of the show, and he goes, oh, Matsumata or, Matsuhira, or, he looked at it, the names that were scrolling by for the artwork, and he's like, oh, those are all Japanese names, this must be a Japanese cartoon. And I was like, Japanese cartoons? I didn't know, does that exist? Is Japan a real place? It was just a kid.
I know.
And I'm but it opened the doors that there's so much more out there. But like ever since then, everything that I looked at, I like knew immediately if it was a Japanese animated, cartoon or series or whatever. And it intrigued me. That's what like, my first email address when the internet started, was animehead@hotmail.com, and then like, as soon as Google started up, I'm like, oh, I'm going to coin my name, before it gets taken, so I'm like animehead@gmail.com. That's my original email address. And that was like, I don't know when that came out. It was like 25 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
But, but yeah, like, that's cool that you say that, because I can totally relate, like that's cool you were in Italy when you were witnesses, because I've been to Italy when I was in the Marine Corps, and I traveled around, and I was in Napoli, or Naples, as we know, and when I was there for a few weeks, like I would ride the train. I rode the train up to Rome, and while I was on the train, I noticed a guy sitting across from me. I was wearing a Bubblegum Crisis t-shirt.
Oh, wow.
The anime Bubblegum Crisis.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then I saw this other guy sitting across from me who had a Tenchi Muyo t-shirt on. and we made eye contact, and then we looked at each other's shirts, and we just kind of nodded. Yeah. And that was it. Because, I mean, I'm pretty sure he didn't speak English, and he was just, but we like nodded, and we were like, yeah, anime. We're connected.
Well, and it's crazy too, that older anime stuff. Like, and I throw that in there because I also like Tetsugen 28 Go, certainly Speed Racer in its original incarnation. There was a ton of different shows like that. That there was one that I was addicted to called Sanpei, and so there was Sanpei and Forza Sugar. Forza Sugar is a beautiful story about a young boy who grows up in a family of boxers whose father dies at a carnival. He succumbs to the injuries from his last fight, and he dies on a bench. And it's basically that young boy's story growing up to avenge his father's death. All of these things were based on mythic proportions. The hero's journey, the tragic fall, and then rising to fight on.
Yeah.
The characters that I draw, these big monolithic robots and these shadowy things, the reason that I chose the puppetry thing was, well, and this is the other part of it. So anime was part of it, but we had gone, the base, Aviano Base, used to have these trips where a bunch of military families would get on school buses, big blue school buses for the Air Force, and we'd go places. Well, one of the places we went was Venice. And when we went there, two things happened. First thing was, we had gone to a little theater, and I will never forget this. It was closest to the water, so it was already water creeping into the building.
Oh, wow.
So they had little planks out there for us to like walk across the main floor to keep our feet dry. And we watched these amazing shadow puppets. And it was just crazy. And I fell in love with that. And so I was like, I became obsessed with it. Well, then after that, we were walking around, and I remember they were trying to figure, my teacher at the time was with us on that because her husband was in the Air Force. And she was, I will distinctly remember she was talking to one of the gondola guys to see how much it would cost for us to use the boat and everything else like that. We never did get in the boat, but I noticed a guy painting over to the side. It was the very first time I'd ever heard the term plein air, because I said, what are you doing? And he talked to me in Italian, and I could understand it back then. And I don't remember the word plein air, but I remember him saying that, it was a painting of the moment. And I said, that's beautiful. And he said, are you an artist? And I was like, I'd like to be. And my mom, who was standing behind me, said, yeah, he is, or he wants to be. And he says, well, here's a chance. And there's this gorgeous watercolor he's working on. He hands me the brush. And I was like, I'm going to fuck this up so bad.
You're like put on the spot there,
I know, right? But I nervously, he held his palette over. And I just, that moment of all the mixed colors, the saturated green that I chose. And there was no green in that painting, but, and I chose it, and I gingerly, just nervously started to paint, and he pressed my hand up against it and made the stroke broader and harsher and let it run down. And he was like, que bello. And I was like, what? And he was like, it's good. And that moment just solidified it for me. So it was kind of like those 3 years are so formulative in me becoming what I am now. And especially these things. It took me a long time to even want to tell this story because I've written other comic books. I've done other things, but this is the one that was probably the closest to me because growing up there for those 3 years fundamentally changed how I looked at things like myth, and being in Europe kind of like rearranges your brain.
Yeah.
Because the first time I saw the Colosseum, I'm like, that can't be real.
Yeah.
You see things like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You see other things like that. You see these old forests. And when I mean old, I'm talking like older than the United States, easily.
Yeah.
These old growth forests. And it's not hard to imagine why these old stories that eventually became fairy tales came to be. And all of that stuff is the same sort of thing I try and evoke in what I do now. The reason they're shadowy is because I want people to interpolate how they feel, what they find in them, and for the narrative to be driven that way. Right now, and it's weird because all of the artwork that I have currently all sprung from a video game idea I had 3 years ago that I wanted to try and do. And that was all concept art. I was doing the Ralph McQuarrie thing. I was like, well, I'm going to make the concept art first, and then hopefully somebody will like the story. And that's where that came from.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's still a story that I'm writing. I've got the first few pages done. I'm hoping to get the next one. Well, no, I have to get the next one completed by next year. But, and that's where that started from, is that. So, and then some of it too falls into the same thing that Guillermo del Toro always talks about, where when he was a young boy in Mexico, and he's like 10 years older than me, he always talked about going to what they call 2-brick cinemas. And the bricks were for throwing at the rats that would undoubtedly try and attack you if you had any popcorn. But he said, that's where he first saw kaiju films, like because Mexican cinema brings a lot of Japanese films over.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he was familiar with like Tetsugen Go and Astro Boy and all these other things because they would show those before the Godzilla films.
Oh, man.
And so all of that stuff is what ended up in his movies when he did the Hellboy films, and especially Pacific Rim.
Oh.
Those were his love letters.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense now. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I've watched like Pacific Rim with my kids because my son Logan is like a diehard Godzilla fan. Like, he knows the difference between like the Toho films and the I forget which the other production company is, but like he knows the eras of the different types of the
Showa era and all those. Yeah.
Showa. Yeah. Like he knows all that about them. And actually today we just finished we watched the last episode of the Godzilla anime, the Singular Point. And we've been watching that for the last, like, whenever he's over on the weekends, like we watch a couple episodes. And so today we watched the final episode and it was just like, oh man, like, that was cool. Like the story on it is just so gripping. You're like, and there's so many references that to the old films, like throughout the different eras of the films. And we're like, and he just notices them and recognizes all these different things, but And the only reason he's into Godzilla is because I had a bunch of VHS tapes of all these different Godzilla films, like from before he was born. And like when he was a little kid, like 1 or 2 years old, like we would just throw in a Godzilla tape and watch it, in between like watching, PBS kid shows, like once the kid shows are off, like, oh, let's just throw in Godzilla, and he's been hooked ever since. And when I was a kid, like my mom used to like, say, what are you doing, Matt? Like, are you being Godzilla right now? Like, because I'd be stomping around the house, like, making my noise, like, because the 11:30 movie on Channel 11 in St. Louis after cartoons on Saturday morning, like that was a ritual to me, was getting up at like 6 a.m.
Oh yeah.
And watching cartoons until like 11:30, and then the Godzilla movie would start. Yeah. And then I'd watch the Godzilla movie, and then that was my Saturday, like every Saturday for like the longest time. And I was so into it, and I was like, I wanted to be Godzilla.
I know, like, well, and it's also crazy too for me. There's a parallel to a degree. Yeah, I always got up and watched cartoons as well too, because like, and that's a whole nother subject I could go on for days and days. But I always loved that Saturday was the day I would stay up all goddamn day, because like at night I couldn't go to bed. I couldn't sleep. My parents would try and go to bed like around 10 o'clock, because my parents were the kind of Catholics that wanted to get to church early. Like we got there like 6 a.m. for the good seats, and like just like super freaking early. And like, when's mass? Noon. And like I'm like but like I would get up at like 1 a.m. and this is so weird, because back then you had VHF and UHF. That's it. We didn't have cable. That's all we had.
Yeah.
But we had one. This was how young I was. This is before I was in first grade, when we lived in not Kennedy, Texas, Schertz, Texas. And I remember this distinctly. We had these big green couches, and I would go and I would get a juice box, and I would go sit down, a Capri Sun or something, and I would go sit, and I would turn on the television, and I knew where the public access channel was.
Oh, wow.
And we had one that was beaming in from San Antonio or something. Two things. First of all, that was my first exposure to Elvira.
Oh.
I had a crash course in puberty at like fucking 6. You know what I mean? I'm like, it affected it affected everything in my life. But so like she would introduce like old Hammer horror films and Godzilla films.
Oh man.
And I remember Mom and Dad would get up and watch that with me. And they would and that, like, I wish that was something that I had early recordings of. Because like I just I remember distinctly that was during her low budget time. So, she just did the host segments, and they would sell those segments to different channels, and they would just play her segments like where they wanted.
Syndication, like going out to
early
syndication. Yeah. Like before the cable TV, like, and they did all the, I remember like later on, like the late 80s was like, Gilbert Gottfried was like on like USA Up All Night, like it would just play these random B movies, like.
I saw so many Roger Corman films through that shit, man. Just like terrible.
Yeah.
It's like Velociraptors and warehouses. That's all he ever did. That jackass, man. Like, he killed cinema. I say that, but I will guilty pleasure watch a Roger Corman flick anytime.
Didn't MST3K do some of those? Like, I don't know which ones that he did, but see, that's a whole other love of mine too. MST3K, I didn't discover them until they released the movie. Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's only because I found, like, it was weird because the movie version does This Island Earth.
Yeah.
I found that in a bargain bin for like $2.
Oh,
and I'm like, so I was pretty late to the game. I didn't know anything about riff tracks or anything. I knew none of that stuff. And even that stuff, like, that introduced me to a whole bunch of other sci-fi I didn't know about. Wow, like all of their series, and like I fell in love with all that stuff, like Plan 9 from Outer Space, all that crazy stuff, man. Just
the Ed Wood films. I remember seeing the Ed Wood stuff like a long time ago. My dad actually was like, here, we got to watch this. It's supposed to be like the most horrible sci-fi movie ever, and it's like Plan 9 from Outer Space, like, and I saw that when I was really young, but I saw MST3K. It was on cable. I think when it started, it was on, when it very first started, it was like a public access. Like,
yes. Yeah.
And then they got a syndication with Comedy Central, I think.
Yep.
That's right. And then later, like, I think I saw it when it was on Comedy Central, and I was at one of my older brothers was with this one girl. Like, I mean, she became my sister-in-law, and they had a kid, but we used to go to like one of her brothers' houses, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always watching Comedy Central.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like smoking and drinking in the dining room, and I was just there as a kid hanging out in the living room. And they had, like, I remember watching Gamera on it, but it was Mystery Science Theater, and they were making fun of it the whole time. And I'm like, what is this? You know, like I've seen the Godzilla movies, you know, grew up with those, but like, this is a Gamera film, and there's these three little silhouettes in the bottom, and they're talking about the film. And I'm like, this is like gold, you know, like I was like, and I knew about that, and I would see it every once in a while. I didn't have cable a lot when I was growing up because we couldn't afford it. But I would, whenever I'd go to somebody's house, I'm like, have you heard of this thing, Mystery Science Theater? Like, and you know, like I would look through their like TV guide to try to figure out when it was going to come on next. So I'm like, I want to see what their next thing is because this is hilarious, you know?
I know.
And so I had known about it. And then when the movie came out, like when I heard about it, I was totally psyched. I actually went to, there's kind of like an independent theater. It's like a really old theater house in St. Louis in a place called the Central West End, and it's called the Tivoli.
And, yeah.
And when Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie came out, they actually had it playing there.
That's beautiful. God.
And I was working at the St. Louis Bread Company at the Galleria Mall at the time. So I'm like, I talked to some friends and I'm like, let's go see MST3K, the movie. And they're like, oh yeah, we're in, you know? So we met up and we went and saw the movie, and I was like cracking up the whole time. And it was just amazing. And like, I started collecting like the VHS tapes and stuff after that. And I'm like, now I've got the whole collection on Plex, you know? I'm like, and my son knows about it too because of the few Godzilla movies he was really into. I'm like, let's watch this version of it, you know? Like we watched like Godzilla versus Megalon. It's like one of the worst Godzilla movies ever.
It is,
but it is so hilarious. Like
it is. It is. It's my perennial favorite. That's the one that I still have on VHS. Just because I love
I do too. I think somewhere.
The box art is ridiculous. They're standing on buildings, fighting it out to the death.
I think it's like the World Trade Center or something.
It's and something I'm like, this has nothing to do with the film.
I know.
This is insane.
It's awesome, man.
Yeah. It's like all those Turkish Star Wars posters. Like, what is this? You know, like, because stuff like that, all that stuff is grand. And even then, like those old movie posters, they're so bombastic. They're so over the top. That's even a lot of what inspires what I do still. You know, like I just, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I kind of got that. I kind of got the feeling like sometimes when I look at your art, I'm like, man, like I think of the old movie, the retro movie posters from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Like, you know, I'm like, man, it's like, I wonder, you know, so that's good that you're confirmed what I was thinking. Like, you know.
I get so many people that, like, especially at shows, they'll be like, you know, what influenced you? I'm like, man, where do I start? Like, because like so much of it, you know, like is a lot of what I just talked about, but it can even be something like, you know, like there's a lot of people will think like the first thing that most people immediately go to is Samurai Jack. I get that a lot. Then I'm like, yeah, that's definitely an influence, especially his new show Primal. You know, it's this starker, more agitated sort of design aesthetic. And it's mythic in its own qualities as well, too, especially Primal. That's like one of the most intense shows I've ever watched in my life.
I'm going to have to check that out now because I haven't seen that yet.
It's Samurai Jack, but hyper violent and hyper emotional.
Oh, wow.
It revolves around a dinosaur and a caveman, and I will tell you no more just because the road to discovery in that show is fucking beautiful, dude.
Wow.
Yeah. But there are a couple of the episodes, I think, online. You can watch it on the Adult Swim website. I don't know if they got the whole season on there or not. But so the point is with all that stuff is that, like, you know, whenever I get asked that sort of stuff, it's like, well, you know, it's different things because just as much as like any of these things having to do with monsters or robots played into it too, you know, there was also a period when I had kind of like, this is weird to say, I hadn't lost interest in it, but I had to go back and rediscover it, which is full circle back to what we were kind of talking about earlier, where you have these moments in life where you're really into stuff when you're younger, right?
Yeah.
And then there's going to be this little time when you just kind of, it just goes away, right? And back here on the shelf, can't see it in the camera too well, but back there on the shelf, there's a very beat up die-cast robot. And we got that when I was in second grade, and it's Spider-Man's mech from from the Japanese Spider-Man show, because he had a giant robot on there, and it's crazy. That the whole Japanese Spider-Man thing is crazy, but those sort of things, the memories of that make me want to bring that stuff back to life, and interpolate it into what I create now. And I think, I think sometimes, like, you'll see a lot of people, and this isn't trashing on anyone else, but I think a lot of times creators will feel a need to want to make something that is trend worthy or the current thing.
Yeah.
When I'm like, yeah, but what if you take what you really love and you just try and make that work?
Yeah.
Because you'll be that much more invested in it,
That's true. That's, you're putting, I mean, that's almost true with like any walk of life or thing. Like if you, if you're in love with something, whether it's like, a certain type of like literature or like scientific study, like you're like, I imagine scientists working on something. They're like, I loved this area of study, so I want to bring some of those aspects into my theories or, my research, like, my style of presenting things, like if they're presenting it to the like academic community, like, they may have listened to lectures from a particular, like a particular scientist or, whatever, like from the long time ago, like 50s. And they like say they like the way that they presented this information. So they'll kind of like, I'm in love with the way that he presented it. So like, let's just do this way. I'm going to project this information that I've discovered on my own in the past like couple years and like present it like that in hopes that other people will be like, I really like the way this is presented, and it's like adopting ideas that were formally presented, but like, from like a new angle. I mean, it's like you're just, you're not like redoing it or rebooting things. Like you're just presenting it the way that you best. And that's the same thing. Like it's like you, if you're trying to teach someone how to do something or show them how to do something, like show them in the way that you would have wanted to be shown.
Yeah.
What would help you learn the best? Yeah. And then in hopes that like there's other people that learn from your same style of learning, because everybody's like auditory or visual, different styles of learning. And if you present it in the way that you learned the most from that information, it may resonate a lot better with people that learn that same style. Like,
agreed. Yep.
But like, yeah, like the way, I mean, I can see some of the Samurai Jack thing now. I didn't think of it before, but
well,
I think there's one image, like I remember like the one big robot, and it's like, it's mostly like silhouette style, like with the dark and it has like the things protruding from the head, like the style. Yeah. And I'm like, it seemed like I recognized it from something, but I'm like, no, I don't know what it is. But like, what's the main evil character in Samurai Jack? Like
Aku.
Yeah. Like, maybe I don't know. But
there's a lot. Well, even in those characters, like, so something that I'm a big fan of Doug Chiang. He was the lead concept and art directing artist on Star Wars episodes 1, 2, and 3. And when he designs things, he's like, if you cannot recognize the silhouette first and foremost and recognize what that character is, what that vehicle is, or where this location is, it's not a good design. And I was fascinated by that because I thought, okay, surely he's simply applying this to science fiction. He's not. He's like, look at a GT Shelby, look at a Model T Ford, look at an F-35 jet, look at a B-36 Stratofortress,
Yeah.
Even if you don't, I mean, there's a reason why those books of studying airplane silhouettes, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, he simply took that and he reapplied it back toward what he did. So all of the vehicles, and especially in episode 1, are based on animals. The droid tanks are lions with their paws and their face.
Oh, wow.
And it's crazy if you ever get a chance to, I think it's on the episode 1 disc, there's a behind the scenes disc that talks about how everything he designed was based on nature, on shortcuts, on how we perceive something. And he took it and he simply roboticized it, turned it into a graphic element. The droids are very insect-like. Things like that. And so he was like, the more that you can bring about something that people feel a sense of familiarity with, the stronger of an impact that design will have. And he was like, for better or for worse, the more marketable it also becomes as well, too. Because one of the things that he often would say is that there's a lot of good art out there, but sometimes some of it gets overly complex. You lose it in the fact of like, but I want all these details. But are the details necessary? This isn't real life. This is your rendition of it.
Yeah.
That's not playing down on hyper-realism. It's simply saying there's a lot of ways to communicate imagery. And his work also made me strive to look more like, and this is something that, especially when I was working at the museum, although they didn't have a lot of Paleolithic art, I would look at a lot of the Greek art and other things like that, the Egyptian collection, and you start to absorb a lot of that flat aspect, both Greek pottery and, Egyptian hieroglyphs in general are flat based.
Yeah. Like a two-dimensional kind of.
Correct. The concept, the neoclassical concept of contrapposto with a shifted weight had not occurred yet. So that was not prevalent in their art until it became Greco-Roman art. And then even when the Romans had more influence in Upper Egypt, you would start to see that sort of thing. Because even their statues that were three-dimensional were very flat and, repulsed. Yeah. So all that stuff played into it as well too. And I minored in Egyptology in college. So, and that only came about because I like the art so much. So all that stuff comes into it too. That's why there's all that crazy symbology in a lot of my illustrations. And that's why it's really hard. And like, I can drone on for hours because I'm like, no, but there was this too.
Hey, sorry for the interruption, folks. This episode ended up going really long, so I'm actually splitting it up into 2 separate episodes. You can check out the continuation of this discussion on the next episode. Actually, I may do another recording for a different episode, and then I will follow up with this conversation with Mario, the Artisan Rogue, probably at another date. It may be the episode after that or the following one after that even. I'm trying to keep the episodes down to around an hour to an hour and a half because I want to keep our listeners engaged with the podcast. And I don't want to just have you sitting there listening for 3 to 4 to 5 hours and wondering when it's going to end. So stay tuned. Check out the continuation of the conversation with myself, Wormhole Matt, and my good friend Mario Mora, the Artisan Rogue. Be sure to check out his social media. He's on Twitter and Instagram and all that as Artisan Rogue or The Artisan Rogue. He also has a TikTok and an Etsy store. Is it Etsy or Etsy? I don't know. So check that out and you can see all of his really great artwork and his graphics that he has up for sale. Definitely support our our local artist. He's done some great work out there. I appreciate him being on this podcast. So a good, big shout out to him. So everyone, check out the next episode that we continue where we left off with this one, and you'll hear the continuation of our discussion. And in the meantime, if you want to check out the podcast social media, please do so, and please rate our podcast on iTunes and Anchor and Spotify, wherever you can leave a review. I'd love to hear it. I need the feedback so I can help, it'll help me provide better content for everyone. So we have a website. It's linktree or linktr.ee/wormhole_manifest. Twitter is wormfestpod. So check out @wormfestpod. Instagram is wormhole_manifest. And you can send us an email even at wormholemanifest@gmail.com. So anyway, thanks for listening, as always. And we will see you on the continuation of this one or on another completely different episode that should be coming up soon. And then, then you'll see us and, you will listen to us. We are going to be doing videos eventually, because when I'm recording this, I'm doing webcam stuff. So stay tuned for that, too. That's going to be a big project. I'm going to do a big compilation highlights video from, all the special guests that I've had on the show. And that'll be cool. You can see us just bullshitting around and talking to each other and having fun. So, thanks, guys. Stay tuned, and we will see you in the next episode. Peace.